But then the other bear that was following me attacked her. They were literally fighting over me and on top of me. I felt like I was getting crushed into the ground as their heavy bodies kept falling and stepping on me. Just 2 years after losing his wife and best friend, Carl's doctor informs him that he too is living on borrowed time. But rather than accepting this fate, he decides to venture out into the world and see the places that him and his wife had spoke about prior. What he finds is more than he ever expected. Hello and welcome back to Talk About Strange. Thank you for joining me here today. I have another phenomenal encounter story to share with you. The ending of this story will blow your mind, so I hope you stick around and enjoy. Let's go ahead and jump right into the story right now. Hello, my name is Carl. I'm 70 years old and I reside in the great state of Washington. I've enjoyed watching your channel for a while now. You seem like a nice enough fella and people tend to send you some very interesting stories. So I've decided to share my near-death but strange experience with you. If I ramble on too long, please don't hesitate to cut some out. This is the first time I've told this story to anyone other than my family. I retired at 58 due to a grim medical prognosis. Just 2 years after losing my wife, I was told that I was living on borrowed time. For a while, I actually welcomed my fate. I thought I was ready to go be with her, the best friend I've ever had in this whole world. But one day I woke up and realized that I had a few things left to do before I was ready to go. I've always been a hard worker and probably spent too much time in the office, but I was fortunate enough to tuck some away for an early retirement. Unfortunately, I sacrificed a lot of living in the meantime. My wife and I talked a lot about the places we would go and things that we would do after retirement. But that didn't seem to work out quite as well as planned. Life can be funny that way. After losing her, I found it very difficult to sleep in my own bedroom. In fact, it was hard to sleep at all. So I'd sit in my recliner and watch TV until I'd fall asleep. One night, I fell asleep watching that show, Alaskan Bush People. I believe it was season 2, maybe 3. It was after they got chased out by some of the townspeople. Anyway, they bought this beautiful place in Alaska and named it Browntown. I watched them go out and explore all these beautiful islands and forests all over Alaska, as they built this extraordinary life away from civilization. Though I always imagined it would be colder there, it is Alaska after all. Anyway, sometime during the night, I dreamt my wife and I were living out there in the forest like the Billy Brown and his family. Even our kids were out there with us, which is something I was sure they wouldn't do. But boy, it was an interesting dream and it felt so real. When I woke up, I had the strangest feeling. I was excited. I didn't feel like I was dying. In fact, I felt alive again for the very first time in a long time. For some reason, I felt like I needed to go to Alaska and see some of these places. I could almost hear my wife saying, "Let's go. Never retreat, never surrender," as the Browns would say. So the adventure began. I knew better than to tell my kids because I knew they would try and talk me out of it. However, I did leave some instructions with my attorney just in case. Then gathered a few things, booked a flight, and off I went. But don't worry, though. I did decide to tell my son after I landed in Chichagof, Alaska. My plan was to jump on some charter boats and travel by land and sea all the way to Skagway and back, stopping to explore along the way. I spent a couple of days in Juneau. While I was there, I bought a tent and a sleeping bag. So if the opportunity presented itself, I would spend a night, or one night or more, on these islands and shorelines. I asked a couple of the skippers if they knew of any good spots for me to camp out. Most of them said, "Yeah, I'll find a nice motel for you to stay in the next town." They didn't recommend me staying alone on any of these islands or shorelines without experience. But I was determined and didn't think I had anything to lose anyway. I finally found a nice fella that took me out to a spot on Chichagof Island, a place that he thought I'd be safe, which is where I wanted to go anyway, and it was fairly close to where they were filming Alaskan Bush People. Before leaving, he asked me again if I was certain that I wanted to stay there and if I really understood how dangerous it was to be out there alone. I assured him that I'd done my homework and that I'd brought bear spray and an air horn, and that I'd be okay. It was just one night. He reluctantly agreed and even offered me a handgun, which I declined. Then he insisted that I don't go wandering off in the forest and even gave me some tips about the wildlife in the area just in case. I agreed to his terms and then set up a time with him to come pick me up the next afternoon. He dropped me off in the most beautiful location. I watched him leave and then looked up to the sky and said, "Well, honey, here we are, just like in my dream." I found a nice spot near a clearing and set up my tent. It was the first time I'd ever set up a tent. They're a lot harder to set up than they look in those videos I watched on YouTube. I was afraid I was going to end up sleeping under the stars, but I finally figured it out. With that part out of the way, I wanted to wander around a bit, but the skipper's warning kept replaying in my head. To tell the truth, I knew in advance I hadn't come that far just to sit on the shoreline and wait for him to pick me up. I wanted to see some of those beautiful forests and streams that I'd seen on TV. I didn't realize how dense the brush would be along the shorelines. So I walked along the shore until I found a stream and then hiked back up in along the stream bed until I found a trail that led into the forest. I figured this would be my best bet because at least I could follow the path back that way. I'd walked a long way in. It was as beautiful as I'd imagined it would be. I continued until I arrived at an opening at the base of a mountain. I wanted to hike up the mountain as far as I could and look around the island, but I didn't want to get caught out there in the dark, so I started back to camp. Along the way back, I heard some branches breaking in the woods, but I didn't see anything. It was loud enough, though, that I figured it was probably a bear, so I kept on going. I got back to the stream bed and followed it back towards the beach area. I had that feeling that something was watching me. I turned around and saw that bear wander out from the trail where I just came from and into the stream bed. I watched him for a moment and then slowly walked back to camp. The bear didn't seem to be interested in me, so I wasn't really awful worried about him. It might sound strange, but the entire time I was there, I was talking to my wife just like she was there with me. I remember saying, "Well, honey, that was just a little nerve-wracking." I had pitched my tent next to a big rock, so I'd have a place to sit and look around. It wasn't comfortable, though. After all, it was a rock. But as I was sitting there, when I noticed that bear was heading my way. Remembering what I had read and what the skipper told me, I stood up tall so that he or she could see me there. From what I understood, they prefer to avoid people, and if they can, unless provoked, hungry, or protecting their cubs. I raised my hands and called out, "Hey bear, I'm here." But it still kept coming. By now I could hear those intimidating huffs and grunts they make. It was close enough that even I could tell it was a grizzly bear. So I pulled out my blowhorn and sounded it off a couple of times. He stopped for a moment, then turned and ran off. I took a deep breath and thought, "Oh, thank God." I looked up to the sky again and said to my wife, "Wow, that was close, honey. For a moment there, I thought I was on my way to join you." After I settled down a while, I turned in and was reading my book until I could fall asleep. When I heard what I figured was probably that same bear sniffing around somewhere outside, it was getting closer and closer to my tent. I sat quietly hoping it would pass me by, but instead it started sniffing around my tent. So I hollered, "Hey bear, get out of here." Well, he roared and growled right back at me so loud it scared the daylights out of me. His breath literally ruffled my tent. So I grabbed my air horn and let her rip. Apparently it worked because it ran off. But this time I was starting to wonder if staying there was not the best idea after all. He didn't come back the rest of the night, and the morning brought a new day for me. Though I didn't get much sleep, I felt good and was ready for another hike. So I got ready and hiked back to that stream. When I got there, I used the clean stream water to wash up and brush my teeth like the Alaskan bush people did. Soon as I put my hands in that water, I thought out loud, "They are completely out of their minds. That mountain water is cold. It hurt my skin." But it was refreshing and exciting, so I didn't really mind. I continued my way upstream to the trail entrance I'd found the day before. However, before I got there, I saw that same bear coming up the stream where I had just washed up, a couple of 100 yards away. I thought, what the hell is wrong with this bear? Is it a coincidence or is it following me? I had no place to go but into that trail and head for that mountain. My hope was that it was a coincidence and by the time I came back it would be gone. I was wrong. It was following me. He started gaining ground faster and faster. I didn't bother trying to run. I knew there was no way I could outrun him, and where would I go if I could? I turned around and tried to shoo him off a couple of times, but he didn't care. So I used my air horn again. He stopped and shook his head. He didn't like the sound, but it only slowed him down enough for a moment. I had to keep doing it, so I thought I'd switch it up. I pulled out the bear spray and sprayed some all over the trail, hoping the smell would scare him off. It looked like it worked because he turned and walked off the trail into the woods. I thought this might be a good time for me to head back to the stream and work my way back to camp. I started walking back and saw him there in the woods just off the path. He was just avoiding that spot. As soon as he seen me, he bounced his front paws on the ground and was swiping at the ground. There was something wrong with this bear. He seemed angry and he wasn't about to let me pass him. I didn't have a choice but to continue towards the mountain, so I sprayed it again every 50 foot or so, just hoping to fill the air enough that it would keep him away from me. I finally arrived at the opening at the base of the mountain. From the path to the mountain, it was at least 50 yards, maybe a half a mile from side to side, with nothing but weeds and scrub brush. I looked back and forth, hoping and praying to find somebody, anyone out there that was living there or hunting, maybe even Bear Brown himself. He would know what to do. I'm not afraid to admit, I was scared half out of my mind. I was almost to the other side of the open meadow looking back at the trail. I hadn't seen the bear for a while. I was hoping my plan worked, but I wasn't ready to go check that for myself. Then I heard what sounded like something coming down from the tree-covered mountain behind me. My first thought was he had circled around to attack me from behind. Then I turned and I looked, and it was two bear cubs chasing each other around on the side of the hill. For a second I thought, how cool is that? Then it hit me. Where's your mommy? Sure as heck, she was coming down the mountain behind them. She seen me, and by the time I could even process what was happening, she started charging down the hill towards me. For the moment, I forgot about the other bear and ran back towards the opening as fast as I could with her bearing down on my heels. I already knew I was dead, even before I got there, but I had to try. I was trying to spray the bear spray at her as I ran, but couldn't seem to get a good shot at her face, nor did it seem to affect her much anyway. Then the other bear came out from the trailhead in front of me. I was looking for a different direction when she swiped her claws across the upper back part of my legs and sent me rolling. She was on me instantly. All I could do was curl up into a ball and pray it would be over fast. But then the other bear that was following me attacked her. They were literally fighting over me and on top of me. I felt like I was getting crushed into the ground as their heavy bodies kept falling and stepping on me. I tried to crawl out from under them while they were distracted, but they stayed over me. At one point, one of them let out a whine like it was hurt, and they separated. I thought this was my chance, and I started army crawling away. I didn't get 10 feet when one of them bit into my leg and started ripping me backwards. I screamed with pain when I felt its teeth hit the bones in my ankle. But then the other one bit onto my shoulder, and it became a tug of war. I tried punching its massive head, but it was like punching a thick fur carpet with no real effect. I hit something hard a couple of times, but it was useless. It was just a matter of time before my body parts would give way and they would tear me in half. My mind was starting to shut down when for some reason they dropped me. I wasn't sure what was happening. I was hoping maybe they'd made their point and was going to walk off. But they both kept making that terrifying roaring and ripping at the ground. Hard as it was, I lifted my head to have a look and saw the mother bear up on her hind legs looking at something. So I looked for him, and he was doing the same thing. All I could think was, great, there's another bear here for dinner. Then I realized they were no longer paying attention to me. This was my last chance. I sat up the best I could. I couldn't really move my right arm because my shoulder was dislocated and shredded. I used my left arm and right leg to lift and scoot myself backwards away as I was watching them. Then I looked in the direction they were looking. I saw what looked like another bear, but much larger. As my eyes focused, I got a better look. From what I could see, it looked kind of like a silverback gorilla furiously pounding and punching the ground. I had blood in my eyes and was obviously in shock. I thought I must be seeing things. The mother bear dropped down and ran off for her cubs, but the male stood his ground. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the gorilla-looking creature throwing rocks and weeds and dirt at the bear. It got mad and charged at the gorilla-looking creature, but it stood up and swung its massive hand across the bear's head and sent it rolling across the ground. He got up and shook it off, then charged at it again, and again it basically slapped the bear across the head, sending him rolling. Only this time he stumbled off to the forest, whining. By now, I was entering the trail. I kept telling myself to stand up and run, but my legs wouldn't listen. Soon I was clear enough and rolled over onto my stomach, and with my left arm and right leg kept dragging myself down the trail. It wasn't too long before I could hear heavy footsteps slowly walking behind me. I was afraid to look back. In my mind, I thought, if I don't look back, maybe it won't kill me. Somewhere along the line, though, I felt myself shutting down. I didn't know if I was going to pass out or if I was dying. I looked in front of me, and all I could see was my wife standing up ahead on the trail ahead of me. I think I smiled when I said, "I'm almost there, honey." Then the lights started to dim. I felt myself being lifted. I thought I was floating my way to heaven when I started faintly hearing the stream water running. Next thing you know, I felt it splashing on my face. The cold shocked me, but I still couldn't seem to open my eyes. Then I felt it again. I shook my head and forced my eyes open as much as I possibly could. Through the water and the blood, I seen its face. Not clear enough to know exactly what it was, but I knew it wasn't a gorilla, nor was it a human, and it was carrying me. Then I guess I blacked out again. Then from a distance, I heard something calling out my name. I wanted to open my eyes, but I still couldn't seem to open them up, and I couldn't seem to stay awake. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the ICU. People started making a bunch of commotion around me. I was finally able to open my eyes enough to see, though everything was still a little blurry. To my surprise, my son and both my daughters were there. For a while, I thought I was dreaming again. They kept asking me if I was okay, and I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." "Where am I?" They said, "You're at a hospital." I knew that. What I wanted to know was what state I was in. They said, "You're still in Alaska." They came as soon as they found out about my attack. They said I was unconscious for a week. My leg had been broken and my left shoulder had been severely dislocated and had to be reattached. I had several cuts and bites to my body, and my face had been trampled on pretty good, which is why I couldn't open my eyes and needed several surgeries. I was very fortunate to be alive. They asked me what happened, and I told them exactly what I saw. You should have seen the looks on their faces. My kids laughed and said to the doctor, "Don't mind him, he's a wise guy." I realized how it sounded, so I laughed and said, "Well, I almost had you." The fact was I didn't want to get put in a loony room. The only one that actually believed me was my son. When I asked him why he believed me, he said, "Dad, I don't care how tough a person you are, there's no way you managed to drag yourself out of that forest without help, not in the condition you were in." Plus, he said he had talked to my skipper friend. He's the one that found me by my tent and who was calling out to me. He said after getting me airlifted to the hospital, he went back out to gather my stuff and search the area for anything that got left behind, including my wallet and personal contact information. He followed my blood trail all the way back up that area to the area where I was attacked and said there was absolutely no way I crawled out on my own. He also told my son that he warned me several times about wandering around out there alone. Okay, so here comes the best part of the story. While you might think a Bigfoot saving my life was the strangest part, the hospital pulled all of my records and was well informed about my illness. They had run all kinds of tests and scans on me during all of this, but never saw anything in those scans or blood work. After running some more tests, they said there must have been a mistake, that aside from the injuries sustained from the attack, I'm just as healthy as a horse and should live a long, happy life, just so long as I don't go camping in bear country again. I never really put much stock in miracles, nor did I believe in the Bushman, aka Bigfoot. But that was 12 years ago. Knock on wood, pun intended. I'm fit as a fiddle and discovering new things every day. So here's a piece of advice for you. Don't take life for granted. Get out there and explore, because life itself is a miracle. But maybe consider listening when somebody gives you a fair warning. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to read my story. I hope it wasn't too long. Carl. Wow, Carl. Thank you for sending that in to us. What an amazing and inspirational story. Who knows what happened out there? I just think it's just miracles. I mean, I guess you have to. You hear about miracles all the time. I think it's a miracle that you survived the attack from those bears. But who knows, that lease on life, just getting out there might be just what you needed to cure, whatever it was that was going on with you. All I know is I really appreciate you sharing that story with us. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you right here again really soon on the next amazing story.